All right, so raise your hand if you're here at the Boston Application Security Summit. Anybody in the fall? Wow, fewer than I thought. That's good. All right, so I'm going to go as fast as I can, but because this is kind of my hometown, I don't mind if we get much grittier. So depending on how responsive or adversarial you are, I may speed up or slow down. Anybody in here real fast familiar with H.B. Moore's Law? Okay. Well, maybe I'll have to go a little slower. All right, so I started doing this topic right around October 1st. And for the people who weren't here, my mom had just had a pretty bad stroke, and since then she has passed away. But it hit me at a really tough point when, like many of you, I just wanted to quit security. Right? It's a very tough job. You're clearly dedicated to it because you're here on your Saturday free by your own free will. And I started putting into context all the different things we do, all the initiatives we try, all the ways we try to make things better in our organization, in our career, in our environment, or whatever motivates and drives me in security. And I just really came to the point that I realized we aren't getting any better. Right? So there's diversity of opinions on this. So I simply posed the question, are we getting better, staying the same, or getting worse? And how would we know? So now I've changed it to how to hit rock bottom. So there you go. So in order to, we must break you to remake you. And if you haven't hit that point of despair where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you really aren't going to make any changes. There's this really academic sounding line that says, no one changes until the pain of maintaining inertia exceeds the pain of change. For many of us, we're going through, in the current events and public affairs and where we are in our career, we're at that point where we're just on the cusp of that recognition point. I would like to push you over the edge, okay? I'm Josh Corman. You can follow me on Twitter if you like philosophical rants and righteous indignation. But I tend to research things that are all over the place. Most recently, I've been researching Anonymous for 2 years with Jericho from attrition.org. We just did a cyber war talk, which is the douchiest topic we could think of. But we picked it because it was of consequence, it was obfuscated by FUD, and good conversations weren't happening. So that's what I tend to tackle, things that are important, misunderstood, and could get better if we could simply push through that. So I tackle things like that. And mostly I've seen myself as a staunch advocate for CISOs. More recently, though, I'm kind of realizing I'm a bit of an activist. I must make it very clear that while I'm the Director of Security Intelligence for Akamai, most of the research you're going to see here was not done for them or on their behalf, and my comments today are absolutely my own and do not represent those of my employer. So first off, I'm not an expert. I'm sick of people calling themselves experts. It takes 5 dedicated years, full-time, on a single subject, going deep to get even early expertise in a subject. Okay? Most of us, the problems we saw tackled don't even have 5 years of consciousness. This space moves so fast, most claims of expertise are false. Okay? Mostly I just try to passionately ask good questions and look at things because I do worry about things. Right? I'm also a father, so every time I try to quit this thing, every time I say let me go be a school teacher or something less stressful, I realize that even if I can make plans for the rest of my life, my kids are inheriting my neglect, the things I screw up on. And they're going to have to deal with this. Also, this may come off as sanctimonious at times. Gene Kim was the one who encouraged me to do this talk this way, and I didn't want to make it about me, so it's not about me. These are just the things that I've researched and looked at that apply to most of us, so I'm not what's important, it's the ideas that are or aren't. Okay? So like I said, I just lost my mom pretty recently. If you haven't been through that, it's horrible. I don't recommend it. But it really makes you much more conscious of time and if you're wasting time. It also makes it much clearer what your priorities are. In the process when we were hospicing her, I tried to, I had to come up with how would I give her a eulogy, so to speak. And I kept thinking about what do I want to be known as when I'm gone. What's the legacy I want to leave behind? This wasn't mine, but a Navy SEAL I worked with, he said he wanted to be a passionate, purposeful, principled protector and provider. His subline was he wanted to be the kind of man his daughter would want to marry. But that really resonated with me because I think some of us get into this because it's good pay, some of us get into it because we're good problem solvers, some of us get into it for that good versus evil, altruistic streak. I used to joke that I want to be a superhero, I just don't look very good in tights. But I'm not that athletic either. But the 3 words I came up with, and I actually challenge you to do your own. This isn't what you are, this is what you want to be. I want to be honest even when it's risky, right? Which comes in the courageous part. It was really, really stupid of me to research anonymous. Very stupid. But I knew it was important, and I want to do things that actually matter. Most of you don't know me as these 3 things. I'm usually unreasonable and a fool. But there's a great Bernard Shaw quote on being unreasonable, and I suggest you look it up. So, when I was convalescing on my couch in January, I just had like an emergency root canal, and I was very sad over my mother. I was watching Twitter with a different set of eyes. I was watching the event news stream differently than I normally would have. And what I saw was, anyone know what this number is? All right. 44 missed viruses in the 45 viruses that hit the New York Times. This was before their antivirus vendor blamed the victim because they didn't buy more of their crap. If I were to ask you 10 minutes ago, any one of you on the spot, name the efficacy of signature antivirus, you'd probably say it's 90%, just instinctually, right? Some of you are smart enough not to, but most of you, even in the security profession, because I know I tried this at RSA, most people think it's 95, 90% eventually. It starts with a 9. That's not 90%. That's the opposite of 90%, right? In fact, the effective rate of AV is 0. And a lot of you guys know this, right? We're the digerati, we're the inner circle, we know this, right? So some of you baby suit turtles that were the eggs were laid, you actually crawled out of the shell and you're just getting out of the sand. And then this number comes up. Anyone know what this is about? You figured out signature antivirus alone just won't cut it. We need to augment it with things like advanced application whitelisting from Bit9. But if you were in that minority that actually knew you couldn't over-depend upon signature antivirus, by the way, we give the most money of any security product in the entire world to that ineffective security antivirus, signature antivirus. So Bit9 was compromised for many, many months. So if you're one of those defense contractors or financial services guys who knew the digital certificates and signing authorities were taken, I'm not shaming and blaming the victim. In fact, Bit9 wasn't the target. It was some of Bit9's customers were the target. Just like RSA security wasn't the target, it was their customers downstream. So security supply chain is now becoming. So it becomes really, really hard if you want to do this. And then the coup de grace right before RSA, what's this number represent? Anybody, come on, this is a dead crowd. APT1, right? So on the one hand, someone just killed a kitten again. Actually, we both did. Every time someone says APT guy kills a kitten. There's 3. Good thing I'm allergic to cats. On the one hand, I'm happy that there's public mainstream recognition of this, right? On other hands, I go cryptio stabby level omega because every CNN, NBC, every single news station is now talking in the mainstream about state-sponsored espionage. And many of us in our professional jobs have been doing hand-to-hand combat for years. My very first security job in 2001, official security job, my first case was a piece of French espionage stealing pharmaceutical research data. So it's not that we don't believe they exist. And on one way, I'm thrilled that the mainstream talking about it. On the other hand, they're calling them hack attacks, like they have a Big Mac attack or something, and we're letting others control the narrative. So we're not actually getting smarter. The recognition we've been praying for has been usurped with other people controlling the narrative and using it very badly, and we're getting very angry about it. All right, so all that primer was just to get to the question, are we getting better? Right? And experts disagree. There aren't any experts. But I'm just going to say no. No, we're not. And Schneier tried to tell me, well, we are getting better, but we're getting worse faster. So you can, word salad, whatever you want to say. I don't think we're getting better. And there's lots of ways you could ask yourself, right? So I'm going to skip the YouTube references. But, oftentimes we don't have to get better because there's always something to blame, right? We used to blame PCI, the auditor. Then we blame China, then we blame Anonymous, and we still have many others to blame. We can blame Canada next, right? But seriously, how would you know if we're getting better? And there's lots of ways you can try to answer it. One of the ways I used to talk about security with CISOs that are the middle being the ballooning cost, complexity, or risk, it comes from 5 places. threat changes, compliance changes, IT changes, business changes, and economic changes. So on any one of these, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. Are we getting better or worse? Are there more adversaries than ever before? More types of adversaries? Are we worse? Yeah, a lot worse. Are there fewer compliance regimes this year than last year? Did virtualization, x86, cloud computing, SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, PMI, bring your own device? Did those things happen? All right, is the business getting more security conscientious, taking fewer risks or more risks? Right? Economics, you guys getting bigger budgets and more headcount? So on any one of these, I wouldn't say we're getting better, right? I'm not saying that's proof positive, it's just a way to look at it. But mostly I don't give a crap about any of that. I care about the people in this room, right? Now, probably the most bizarre talk on this research I've been participating in the last couple of years is the stress and burnout, the SEC burnout study. Maybe you're familiar with this?
Yes.
Right, SEC burnout. We need to be more active with this. We didn't realize how powerful and important this was when we did it, and now we need to go back to it and put more effort into it. But basically, a lot of our friends are coming to us with thoughts of burnout, fatigue, depression, suicide. In fact, over the holidays, we had a couple high-profile and less high-profile suicides in our community. It's a big deal. And some people mock this particular study because they say, well, I don't know what people are complaining about. We're handsomely rewarded. We get to do fun things. We can break stuff. They're a bunch of whiners. It doesn't matter that there's some haters of this. The bottom line is we're a pretty burned out demographic. There are lots of reasons for that. But just let me give you a couple highlights from the SEC burnout study. We did a Maslow stress index. It's a professional psychological profile. It's a survey. You answer a bunch of questions. And they're basically looking to score you on three things: your fatigue, your cynicism, and your perceived self-efficacy. The third one is a word salad, which basically means how well do you think you're doing. Not how are you doing, how well do you think you're doing. If you get above a certain score on any one of them, you're at high risk in your profession. You should get paid time off or counseling or something. Right? There should be some remediation. We are off the charts in two of the three categories and kissing the line in the third. Our score was very, very high for fatigue. The way Jack Daniel likes to put this is we like our 40-hour work week so much that we do two of them by Wednesday. I believe, I have to double check this, but I believe we actually have the highest score in the history of the exam in the survey on cynicism. So cynicism is your core competence. And then we were right on the borderline with perceived self-efficacy, but when we really dug into the data, it's like people thought they did none of their work mattered, or they thought they were doing a pretty decent job, and there was nothing in between. And we think that's the compliance illusion thing, that, well, I passed out, I'm doing great, and then you get a compromise, or you get something that shows you just how badly you are doing. So there's like a bit of a gap there between perceived and real. But the point of this was, I really don't care about your day job per se. I care about your home life, your personhood, etc. And then I'm going to try to speak to the person in the audience, not the employee or researcher. So there's this notion of why does it matter. I think our demographic is really, really, really good at how to break things, what happened, maybe how we broke it, but we never really ask the why question. Kripke is in the audience. He accuses me of being way too philosophical at times, but I don't think enough of us are philosophical enough. I might be too far to one end, but we never actually stop and say, why are we doing what we're doing? What drives us? Why do we keep doing this job? And more importantly, why does it matter? So don't take my word for it. Go look at the very first round of TED Talks. There's this guy, Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, and he's got the golden circle. I'm going to butcher the cliff notes, but it's a 20-minute video. Watch the whole thing. It basically says most companies and people can tell you what they do. Some of them actually can intelligently articulate how they do it, and almost no one ever tells you why they do it. And that the real agents of change, the real breakthrough companies, the real breakthrough political leaders, they always focus on values first. Why? Because if people value what you value, they'll follow you anywhere. One of the examples is why Apple is more successful than TiVo was. Another example was the Wright brothers over the people who had all the right funding and backing. The one that stuck with me the most is people didn't go to the civil liberties marches for Martin Luther King because he said, I have a plan. It's because they said, I have a dream. So his values resonated with their values, and it got traction. He wasn't even saying anything necessarily new. It was how he was saying it. It was connecting with your brainstem instead of your neocortex, so to speak. But we don't focus on why enough, and I'm going to hopefully, for the time I have with you today in this captive audience, focus a little bit more on why I grow increasingly concerned and why I know we can be better and why we have to be. Now, one of the ways I put things, some of you have seen this, I think this is my first public blog post, but I'm sick and tired of the metrics community talking about frequency times impact. We do a really bad job guessing frequency, but at least there's some backwards looking data. We do a really, really, really bad job guessing impact. It's hard to determine these things. So I'm just going to, I say let's simplify it for my neighbor. How replaceable is the asset? It's kind of related in some way, shape, or form to frequency and impact. But credit cards are the most replaceable asset you can name that we care about. Human life is irreplaceable. Right? Somebody's dead, you can't bring him back unless you want to have a zombie film, which I do like zombies. But if you think about plotting any asset type in this continuum in your environment, we actually spend 95% of our time, money, energy budget on PCI compliance. It's the most effective and most guaranteed use of our time. And some of you know, which I may mention later, I declared a multi-year jihad against the PCI Council. I call it the No Child Left Behind Act for InfoSec. And I thought it dangerously distracted us, and this is a much better way to depict it, which is that I know Fortune 50 companies who don't spend a penny protecting anything but its most replaceable asset type. They ignore their trade secrets, they ignore their sensitive organizational data, they ignore their intellectual property, they didn't do squat. So we focus on the things we had to, at the opportunity cost and neglect of much more important things. I may bring up this chart again later, but my heart and passion is in pushing us towards the left of this screen. Now, when I first got involved with antivirus, it was really to stop the performance impact of our resources. It took up RAM and CPU and network bandwidth, right? Then it cared about crime. It was fungible assets like credit cards. Then the organized crime and the state sponsor goes after intellectual property. I think in retrospect, the reason I was interested in Anonymous is I saw this as a battle for censorship, surveillance, civil liberties, SOPA, PIPA, ACTA, CISPA, and this becomes collateral damage out of those conflicts. And then the safety and human life issue, if you saw the flash talk by Roy, medical device security is terrifying. Dan Geer, maybe it's the sexy mutton chops, but he is one of my intellectual idols. I say that he has more intellectual potency per syllable than any man on the planet. In fact, I got him to blush several times. If you go back and find the Source Boston video from like a month ago, we did a fireside chat with him and Richard Beam, our right and left brain in the industry. He inspired a certain line of thought in me, whether he meant to or not, about security as a factor of dependence. And essentially what I want to say is this is the single reason why I know we're not getting better. And my point is our dependence on software and IT is growing faster than our ability to secure it. I want to say that a second time. Our dependence on software and IT is growing faster than our ability to secure it. We've known about SQL injection for almost 14 years. We know how to fix SQL injection. What's one of the top exploited attack vectors? SQL injection. So we know how, we've had plenty of time, and we can't defend against blind SQL injection pervasively. But now we're putting software into our bodies, into our cars, into our control systems. Our dependence is growing faster than we can keep pace. That's not acceptable. So when you think in terms of dependence, you can either make it more dependable by putting in all sorts of fixes and band-aids and SDLs, or you can depend upon it less. And right now we're doing dependence without thinking if it's merited, responsible, or tenable. All right, so this is the ugliest version of control system or power grid I could come up with, but essentially, just go to Shodan right now. You don't even have to be a hacker. You just have to know how to use a default login and password. Go to Shodan, look for Programmable Logic Controller or some other acronym that PLC or something like that. You will find plenty of directly connected exposed systems that should not be. The first time I used this example, I was on stage at H.D. Moore, and he found a boiler room in the UK in a church that was directly connected, and he could have turned it up to explosive levels. He's like, who would like to blow up a church while we're on this panel? Now, it sounds like fun, but it's ridiculous how dependent we are. The only protection you have in that case is someone have the willpower to go do that. That's it. So if you want to depend on the better angels of everyone in society, I love that line from Dan Geer. The internet made every sociopath your next door neighbor, right? So it's not about what would most people do, it's about what would one person do. I don't like that. I'm very uncomfortable with that. I'm actually looking for another car right now. My lease is almost due, and I couldn't believe it. I actually like this one car, and then I saw the logo of a particular embedded operating system, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think I can buy that car. And I'm not being a snob. It's just like, why is it that we have to have an operating system, a vulnerable, unpatchable operating system in a lot of these vehicles? And almost every manufacturer is using a different one. So I had to call up my friends at Verico and say, which one's the least bad? And I still don't know the answer because many of them aren't letting people test them unless they break the law to do so. But I don't like that. Something that's discomforting about that. It's not just about can you unlock it from outside. It's some of the cars on test drive, you can actually change the suspension with a push of a button. You can control how the car behaves at high speed from the car. So if you can do it from the car, and now it's controllable over radio or Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or many of the above, I don't like this. I'm not a Luddite. I just don't like that elective risk. There's the insulin pump. Got a lot of friends on insulin pumps. I don't like the idea that we have a Bluetooth stack on this. What's the guy's name again? Is it Frank? One of the ones from Roy's talk, PhD out of University of Massachusetts, he's down in Michigan. We were talking about medical device security. I'm like, why the hell did they put Bluetooth on an insulin pump? You can't just plug a wire in it when you go to your doctor to get it tuned up. Why do you need Bluetooth? In what universe is that necessary and sane? He says the bacon principle. Everything's better than bacon, everything's better than Bluetooth. They don't even think about it. It's really that simple. I don't want this to keep going, right? It's not an intelligent one. And even if you have to send, telemetry out, like maybe a subdural, what do they call those? The defibrillators or the pacemakers. If you really want to send some sort of biometrics out, fine, have it one way. But we're just taking stupid risks, and it's not ending. So let's do an experiment. You can even do a grease monkey script if you like. For 24 hours, every time you see the word software, I want you to say vulnerability. So if you have a toaster at your house that's certified by Underwriters Laboratories not to burn down your house, and you put software on it, you now have a vulnerable toaster. Okay? Try it for 24 hours. You'd be surprised. Right after I did this at BSides San Francisco, I can't remember which car manufacturer did a commercial that said it's a computer on wheels. So he said, I have a 4-door hatchback vulnerability on wheels.
Does it make Bluetooth bacon?
Is it Bluetooth bacon? I think you have a t-shirt for that. All right, so substitute software vulnerability. And similarly, when something's connected, there's software in lots of places. That's not necessarily new. But we're connecting it to more things. So if you see connected, substitute exposed. Such that if I have a software-enabled, internet-connected toaster, I have an exposed, vulnerable toaster. And I keep saying this, and people keep pushing back because we like to be contrarian. It's our nature. Even though we know how bad this stuff is, we want to disagree when someone asserts something, we push back. Let me flip it on its head. Is there any technology in your home or on your body that you wouldn't want to have an IP-addressable, hyper-connected feature on? Is there anything you wouldn't use? Oh, we haven't actually answered it. It was rhetorical, but go ahead.
Well, for example, I wouldn't want if I had a heart defibrillator, I wouldn't necessarily want that to have an IP address.
Okay, it's heart defibrillator without an IP address. Oh, by the way, I don't watch much television, but I've heard that Homeland killed the vice president with something like this, which...
Spoiler alert!
Whoops. It had to be Skyler?
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you were actually directly in the security industry, you'd be perfectly used to disappointment. All right, so anyhow, I like the fact that that's brought up, but I don't like the fact that I heard it was done in a very funny way, and we need grounded, rational, fact-based risk discussions. But I haven't seen it, but apparently there's a second one from a less popular show. But I will not spoil that one. So I keep taking JetBlue, and they have this Cisco commercial over and over of the Internet of Things. And I'm just going to be honest, I am not comforted by the Internet of Things. I'm not. It doesn't sound like a dream come true. Some things don't belong connected. Now, this is coming. It's going to happen if you were at Galen Gear's keynote. There's certain things that are just unstoppable. But some of us have to be the voice of reason, and some of us have to actually point out Maybe we can start categorizing certain use cases where that's not a great idea yet.
Like my scale in the bathroom. That's
Sure,
perfect.
sure. I already hacked that. It's actually 5 pounds heavier. All right. So, you know, we tend to also bring technical responses to these things, but I'm going to blitz through some of this. I actually think our problems are cultural, and Jim's seen this now at least 3 times, so I'm really, really sorry. I have a love-hate with OWASP, okay? Open Web Application Security Project, they often met here, I think now they're meeting in Akamai. Great volunteer, open source, free technical training and technical resources and technical tools. Absolutely no people skills. Every time I get a developer motivated to come to their first OWASP meeting, different chapters are better than others. They leave saying, what a bunch of judgmental jerks, right? They just tell me programmers are lazy, they're arrogant, they're stupid, they write bad code. You know, it's not how you win friends and influence people. So I think what we have is plenty of technical supply, but what we've lacked is sufficient cultural demand. Right? We haven't made them understand why it's important. We told them what to do or maybe even how to do it, we never told them why to do it. Back to that golden circle. So I say screw the OWASP top 10, I want to see an OWASP top 1. If we can't figure out with a narrow use case how to eliminate one thing and why it's valuable to eliminate one thing, then we don't have the credibility or the permission to ask them to do more. And I'm not discounting it all. I really love a lot of the efforts, and some of the things they've done have made it much easier for people who already know and want to and have already found religion. But it is, in religious terms, it is a bit of a cult. And it is a bit of preaching to the choir. And the other 99.99% of people designing, developing, and deploying who didn't know that putting Bluetooth on an insulin pump might not be a great idea, you know, that's where we have to target. So I think culturally our demographic tends to confuse activity with effect. Just because we're busy doesn't mean we're making progress. We tend to go for the symptoms, not the root causes. This is the proverbial fighting the heads of the Hydra instead of killing its heart. This is what philosophers do. They look deeper, right? They look at what is actually causing the bad behavior. We do this one's really important. We do the easy stuff, not the important stuff. So this is the proverbial picking the low-hanging fruit, okay? We've done it. The orchard is picked clean at the bottom branches. Now, when all you've done is the easy stuff, what are you left with? Not rhetorical?
The hard stuff.
The hard stuff, right? Which tends to map to the important stuff. So somebody at this point usually shouts out before I even get here the Pareto principle. But Josh, don't you believe in the 80-20 rule? Yes, I do. I also know it's not magic. We can have it backwards. I think we do. Right? You can't be certain that what you're working on is the sweet spot of the 80-20. Right? So when I see best practices, I am almost certain they are not. Usually it's a good practice at best. Typically, it was a good practice in 2003 when we had different IT, different adversaries, and different compliance environments. PCI was cutting edge when it was conceptualized, and it took several years of community to get to its first version. It's hardly changed at all since its first version. What we consider best practices aren't. And whenever I hear somebody say, well, I'm just aiming for good enough, they're going to miss. Right? Good enough typically isn't. It really depends on what you're talking about, the context, the adversary, the asset, etc. So I think our problems are really down to incentives. Now, I don't want to just break you down. I want to build you back up as well. Now, I don't actually have the answers, but I ask really good questions usually. And I'm going to give you, this is the part I don't like doing, but Gene made me do it. I'm going to actually drive through a couple of the experiments I tried and if I thought it was valuable and why. For most of us, though, we don't actually want to get better. But since you're here on a Saturday, I'm going to assume a good chunk of this room, at least for the next few slides, we're going to assume that you actually want to make progress. How's my time?
20 minutes, 25 minutes.
Okay. So, if you want to do things new, you can't do it on well-worn paths. You have to look in the dark edges of the map, and sometimes there's dragons there, and sometimes you regret it, and it's a little bit of trailblazing. But you can't keep doing the same thing over and over expecting different results. I think Einstein called that insanity. So really, really early on, I said, you know what, there's these 7 dirty secrets of the security industry. You're not going to read them all, but secret 0 was that you don't have to be, if you're a vendor, you don't have to be ahead of the threat, just ahead of the buyer. And I think that's one of my most foundational recognition points was that we get our education on threat from the very people selling us anti-threat, and because it's so hard to do primary research, because it's so hard to know what's going on, and the topic is so vast, this tunnels us down to things that are almost by definition not going to be the right things. You can read them more ones later. This isn't really supposed to be autobiographical. It's just you have to start with a healthy distrust that you're not going to get the most important things from the private sector vendors. You're going to get the things that private sector vendors are incented to tell you about. The second thing I did is that instead of just beating down vendors for being liars and cheats and snake oil salesmen, what we need to do is start actually building more defensible infrastructure. This is why I got interested in OWASP in the first place. It's that we have so many people writing future code, you can't just scan for vulns and band-aid vulns and put WAFs and IDSs and firewalls in front of vulns forever and ever and ever. You actually have to start producing less vulnerable Swiss cheese out of the vulnerability industrial complex, right? So we did this in San Francisco, and we said, look, if you build a skyscraper in Boston, you just build a skyscraper. You build one in San Francisco, there's possibly a little environmental problem, perhaps you've heard of earthquakes. So you had to design with the anticipation of earthquakes, just like software needs to do more. So there's plenty of materials there. I'm not going to give you a whole pitch on Rugged, but that was the idea of how do you encourage the supply and demand for better and more defensible infrastructure. Then actually here at the very first BSides, I said, you know what, we're part of the problem. The echo chamber is part of the problem. You got FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but then we go completely the opposite direction and we deny things we know to be true, right? Because we want to be a cantilever to things that sound scary. And then the echo chamber and all the bloviators and bloggers, and there are people whose full-time job it is to blog and blog and blog, and they're blogging on topics they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. So it's really hard for a practitioner who wants to find signal to separate it from noise. So I knew we were part of the problem. Then Chris Hoff inspired me. He said, you know, against the punctuated equilibrium with all this x86 virtualization and cloud computing, we can actually say, screw the past, we're never going to get that right. Let's do it really much better with virtualization and cloud. So we tried to dive in and get in front of the cloud security alliance and everything, and it didn't work. Then I realized, you know what's distracting us is that even when people know what they should be doing differently, they can't. The only budget they have is for the chosen few. PCI's required 11 technologies, which are our most antiquated and ineffective technologies. And I said, look, in our attempts to make, it's just like the No Child Left Behind Act, you had really good security practitioners, average ones, and late bloomers, then you had the negligent that did nothing. And when PCI tried to define a minimum for the negligent, we got a minimum for everybody. It sucked most of you down into a hole where you could do nothing but protect your card data. And it really froze a lot of innovation. Some of those really interesting, innovative technologies that I was playing with at ISS and other places, they died. Or they got sold for pennies on the dollar because there was no market for it. And then when I became an analyst at the 451 group, I had hard numbers to show how the ramp of revenue was going like this, and then it dove off. And pretty much the only ones doing good during the economic downturn post-2008 were the PCI chosen few. So this isn't even just a theory. There was data to substantiate this behavior. That's why I had to tackle that and make us depend less upon it. I can't make you avoid being compliant. I can make you less dependent upon it. Then I went to the metrics community. I did the zombie apocalypse. I said metrics are bunk, and we did a zombie apocalypse and we had analogies to Moneyball. That's Alex talking with my co-author. And several of these people are CISOs, or Wendy took my old role at 451. But the point here was that we keep thinking maybe metrics and numbers will save us. If we actually just get evidence-based decision support, we can leave faith-based decisions. The problem is most of our numbers we're looking at light is best. We're using statistics like Drumsky's lamppost more for support than illumination. And the current state of art is that mostly we're just doing numerology, right? It's still just faith-based, but it's faith in random numbers. It's a guess time and assumption in some elaborate spreadsheet, and then we're feeling better about ourselves. Then we got to the burnout stuff. I'm not going to repeat that, but essentially we realized that we had to take care of our own, or else none of us that could solve the problem would have the energy to. My wife got really, really mad at me, but then I spent a couple of years researching Anonymous, and Jarek and I actually spent over a year writing a very, very long blog series. Some people in the room actually helped quite a bit give us harsh feedback in private before we provoked the hornet's nest, but we thought it was consequential, and what I started noticing is, even if you don't agree with their tactics or don't think they're necessarily that talented, they were actually upset about some things that most of us are pretty upset about too. Increased surveillance state, censorship, problematic legislation, things like CFAA, things like Social Keep Act and CISPA. And in the process, they actually drew my attention to the fact that the UN is trying to take over the internet. It's currently free and open and governed by no one. And they're trying to make it the sole province of nation states who want to introduce taxing, tariffing, censorship, and surveillance within the borders of their countries and their routers and whatnot. So the anonymous stuff was interesting and challenging and scary, but I also thought this is where I started realizing that our cybersecurity knowledge was starting to impact our personal lives. And if they were too aggressive, they were going to cause bad laws. And if they were too reckless, they were going to cause bad outcomes. Okay. H.G. Moore's Law, I thought more of you would know this by now. This is what happens when you go to DEF CON and Black Hat all week. And then you go straight from DEF CON to MechaCon. You get H.G. Moore's Law. So spending a lot of time with hackers in the desert, drinking too much Jägermeister and things like that leads to H.G. Moore's Law. My simple assertion was, for years I was trying to say what PCI wasn't enough, and now I had a way to prove it. And the assertion is, just like Moore's Law's compute power doubles every 18 months, H.G. Moore's Law is the growth rate of a casual attacker. We're talking in terms of slang, it's the growth rate of a script kiddie. So someone with absolutely no talent at all, how strong are they? Because the basic assertion from Bob Russo and the PCI Council was, well, Josh will never stop a determined attacker, but will at least stop a script kiddie. False, demonstrably false. So what I'm going to do here, I'm not going to walk you through all of it, but what I said is every attacker class is 100% successful when you use zero security. As you add security that's effective, you'll start to cause drop-off rates in the adversary. And the casual adversary, this green drop-off rate is how strong is Metasploit today. So largest open source project, I think it's one of the largest Ruby projects, right? The largest? The largest Ruby project. So very talented people in this room, white hat hackers, gray hats. Every day they're adding new modules, new exploits, new evasions, new collaboration tools. There's whole things like add-ons and different things. There's a social engineering toolkit from David Kennedy. So smart people are making the script kiddie stronger every day. I'm not getting into a moral discussion. I'm simply saying good enough, whatever good enough you want to call it, is harder every single day. Unfortunately, we have very static and brittle practices. This purple line, the only one that's past H.G. Moore's line, is how you make a QSA go away. That's the QSA adversary. Right? So the only adversary we can actually stop is the self-imposed, self-inflicted head wound. And every day, H.G. Moore's Law moves to the right. So I can't tell you when you've done enough security. If you go home on Monday, you test a LAN segment or a PCI environment against today's Metasploit. If you can't handle it, you can't handle even our weakest adversary. Again, I don't know what enough is, but I know if you can't handle that, you're not tall enough to ride. And H.G. Moore's off the chart. All right, then there's adversary-centric. This is one that the intelligence community likes a lot. A lot of the risk models that we use ignore the threat actor. In fact, I saw a decent presentation today talking about how you do qualitative risk assessment for the small and medium business, and I asked about adversaries. And there was one column where you can put your confidence in your controls, or maybe how strong you think an adversary might be in this overall map. But I'd like to put to you, just in crude terms that my neighbor would understand, the key determinant in the breaches that's been more than one a day for the last 3 years wasn't anything you did, it was who was after you. The key determinant is the who's after you. And too often we bury that way underneath the asset value and things like that. We could have glorious debates, but a friend, David Eshu, and I spent a lot of time saying what really starts to matter is chaining, much like the kill chain. Everybody seen the Lockheed Martin kill chain? That's really a when horizon, but each one of these chains will have their own kill chain. And it's essentially, who is after it, why are they doing it, which assets do they target, because they don't all go after the same things. What impact does it have, and what are the TTPs or methods? So again, a who to a why to a what to a how. And when you can start to do that, this is how I can tell which anonymous ops were fake. There's lots of false flags. There was a point where very few anonymous ops were false flags or faked by some organized crime gang or whatnot. If you look at the Sony 21 punishments, 21 punishments in a very short span of time. They only publicly took credit for 2. We only attributed 6 of them to them. Who did the other 15? Only 6 of those 21. The media still thinks all 21 were not. But I knew the moment you saw 77 million credit cards stolen and had never once gone after credit cards that was not anonymous. Later it proved out it was not anonymous. I mean, a good hunch who it was, but it wasn't anonymous. So models like this not only help you make better decisions about your limited staff and budget on what to protect from whom, but also help you in an incident response. A lot of these banks think they're getting attacked by a spontaneous protest, and it turns out it's actually organized crime, doxing the front page, so you can't notice the fraud, so it buys time for money mules to actually perpetrate and make it actual value instead of potential fraud. All right, then Gene Kim and I got back on the rugged bandwagon with DevOps this time, because DevOps is IT at ludicrous speed, and what we realized was that this was either the end of IT security as you know it, or a chance for IT security to evolve. And we've been working with people like Netflix and Flickr and Etsy, who went from doing 50 changes a month to 50 a week to 50 a day to more than 50 an hour. And we can barely harden servers at the rate of 5 a month. So this was an interesting piece of work that I won't go into. Remember I said Anonymous pointed out the UN take over the internet? Well, now I go on my nights and weekends to internet governance forums, because the UN is in fact trying to take over the internet, and they came pretty darn close in Dubai in December. They're going to try again this month actually in Geneva. I think it's actually next week. And the US was really not prepared to stop it, and there's only 6 democratized Western nations actually trying to stop it. Most of the world thinks it's a pretty good idea. They want to protect their regimes, they want to protect their GDP. And if we have an internet that is taxed, tariffed, surveilled, and censored, and blocks Tor and Skype, what do you think the response will be from our community? So I'm not as concerned that Anonymous is going to DDoS them. I'm much more concerned that our 35-plus-year-old gray hats who are really talented are going to have to formate an insurgency. And I don't want to get to that. I told you Jared and I did cyber war, so I'm looking at how does this impact citizen soldier militias. There are people in this room I know for a fact are participating in citizen soldier militias, much like the Jester, but in larger groups. Some of them might be doing information gathering and open source intelligence. Some of them might actually be taking actions as vigilantes. It's not comforting to me that these things are happening, but they are. So we're trying to get a dialogue started about what is sane and rational and safe. All right, so back to what you can do. Anything, for the love of God, do anything different, right? Experimentation is king. And I think what we're doing is we're just doing the same thing over and over, and hoping it gets better. I don't think intelligent people, if they reflect on that statement, will actually realize things will get better than the exact same things we're doing. So what is experimentation? Some of that experimentation led to my favorite model, so I'm going to give you the zombie one. If you've already seen it, it's okay. Maybe you'll get something out of it the second time. Anybody seen the zombie apocalypse model, pyramid yet? Besides you two? So, I liked zombie films before it was cool, but Shaun of the Dead is still one of my favorites. If you were being chased by people who want to eat your brains, the undead, and they want to eat your brains, which of these would you run towards? You don't stand a chance in that barn, friends. You're dead. I don't care how good you are. I don't care how much ammo you have, you're dead. So we have to choose defensible infrastructure. And my wife's a dietitian, and she bought me a nice food guide pyramid for zombies. They mostly eat brains, a little bit of gristle, whatnot. So I made a survival pyramid for the zombie apocalypse. And what I'm saying is it's not buying security products that keeps you alive. It's procuring defensible infrastructure. Whether you're writing it with a good SDL, whether you're choosing this Android platform or this Apple iOS, one mandatory access controls, one's discretionary, one has a chance, one might not. You have to make choices like this with your CIO and CTO. If you're not picking defensible infrastructure, you're going to fight bravely and die quickly. And it's one of the reasons we push the rugged DevOps stuff so much. The second key to survival isn't security either. And this is how you actually secure anything, by the way. It's ironic that the two most important building blocks have nothing to do with security. This is reducing the entropy in your environment. So Gene Kim wrote a seminal piece of work based on surveys of the top performing IT organizations. It's called Visible Ops. Now he has the Phoenix Project book, which is even better. And essentially, he found 3 patterns that led to the best outcomes. Do you know what you have? Do you know when it changes? And do you have a tolerance for 0 unplanned changes? So the tighter run IT operations shops actually have a chance to use anomaly detection. They can actually find needles in haystacks. They can actually tell when there's suspicious lateral movement. So having a well-run IT shop lets you manage change much better, and no one can attacking you. Now the idea with the pyramid is the stuff at the bottom has a high return on your investment, and the stuff at the top is the empty calories. Third thing is situational awareness. So if I ran from the undead and I chose a defensible infrastructure, and my fellow survivors keep their wits about them and they don't panic and scream. If we're in the dark, do we have the floodlights, the door sensors, the cameras? Do we know who's attacking from which direction? Is it zombies or werewolves or vampires? Because I need different countermeasures for each. How many? From which direction? So we are poorly instrumented our environment. And you're recently, finally, after this APT1 stuff, you're starting to see more people investing in broader visibility and better instrumentation. Not just in the network level, but at the code level. There's a good OWASP project for application visibility. So again, defensible infrastructure, managed well instrumented, and then, and only then, you use your limited countermeasures. 99% of our activity is buying an anti-foo for a foo, right? So we need the OO and the OODA loop to inform who's attacking and which things we actually need. So I mapped my replaceability continuum against the squished pyramid, and I just thought about the conferences I've heard of in the last couple months and what they're focused on, and you look at the type of submissions, and most talks and most conferences are talking about countermeasures for the least replaceable, the least important assets. You have a couple things like, medical device insulin hacking, sometimes. Thanks to APT1, we are starting to see people talk about situational awareness the last 2 years. I would love you to start leapfrogging and going down the pyramid earlier than you might otherwise have. And if you're a researcher and you just want to cut a name for yourself and differentiate yourself on something consequential and underserved, I'd suggest you don't find another piece of Android malware. I think there's plenty of those. I'm on a couple conference committees, and we had 80% of our submissions for Android malware talks. I never want to see another Android malware talk for as long as I live. Dozens. It's not that it doesn't matter, but how come there's hardly any talks about forking the law or about critical infrastructure attacks, and when they are, they're usually someone who doesn't actually have the credibility to talk about it. But if you want to differentiate yourself, there's plenty of white space here around the stack, the things that matter. All right. One of the problems is we're mostly driven by ego and money. So I am naive enough to at least ask, could we have something that's a little more altruistic? Could you actually realize that there's things that matter more than just your paycheck or your day job? But since I know people are pretty much selfish, you might think I'm nuts. But actually, there's a really selfish reason to care about those things, right? You actually live in this world too. Social contract theory, as fast as I can possibly do it. Social contract theory, Hobbes said the state of nature is the state of war. It's nasty, brutish, and short. He thought people were savages. If you read Lord of the Flies, you probably get a glimpse of what we're talking about. The idea is, if there's only so many coconuts on our island, I should kill you in your sleep and steal your coconuts. But you should kill me in my sleep and steal my coconuts. So none of us are going to be able to go to sleep if we had that kind of a policy. So out of rational self-interest, we form contracts. That's the simplest version I can give you. So whether you're altruistic or just really good at being strategically selfish, there are reasons you should care about the white space that we're in. So I'm going to pick on Paul.com. Last time I was on this podcast, we were talking about stress and burnout in the Phoenix Project. And the way we actually weren't completely discussed at the end of the podcast was, we said, well, at least we have job security. And I said, well. But the problem I have with job security is that it lets the pressure off, and we should be frustrated sometimes, and we should be pissed, because back to my point earlier, you don't make a change until you're sufficiently motivated. You have to hit the bottom. So hopefully next time you feel the instinct to say we'll have job security, trust me, we will always have job security, even if we try these harder problems. So these are the people that made me better and made me do these research projects together, various folks, yes, even Dan Kaminsky. But what you start doing is you mash up their brilliant ideas with your ideas, and you start getting interesting things. And I'm not going to go through the metrics anymore. So back to the sick and tired. I love that line from Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. So if you're perfectly happy and you think we're doing a great job, there's nothing to change. If you are sick and tired of being sick and tired, if the pain of maintaining inertia is greater than the pain of trying something new, why not experiment? So I'm not going to beat you on these, but to tease you for hallway conversations, maybe over a beer. Some of the areas I want us to hold our nose and eat our lima beans this year for 1 year, we may actually pitch this at DEF CON, is should we explore professionalizing our trade? We hate it. We hate ISC squared, we hate CISP. But we have absolutely no way to get rid of charlatans. None. We've tried. And we have absolutely no way to separate really talented people from pretenders. So we actually want to have some people do some uncomfortable experimentation with the notion of professionalization. Same thing with litigation. We can complain about the CFAA, or we can propose something sane and tenable. We can hope EFF saves us because we throw a couple dollars their way, but we can get technically experienced and literate people engaged with law professors. I'm trying to do this right now with Wharton School and other places, with law professors, with people on the Hill. Legislation. Kripke is going to literally blow a fuse in his brain next time he sees something like Lieberman's last bill. So we can either complain and excoriate them with blogs about how bad their language is, or some of us could try to infiltrate, I don't mean evil in evil ways, we could actually try to propose boilerplate rubrics and language and framework and give it to them. They often will take some because they lack expertise. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm not even saying it will work. Those are really complex systems that are well insulated from outside ideas. But if you think about how we hack a mobile phone architecture or a complex SAP system, we do that stuff all the time. So how do we take the kind of person like Charlie Miller who can, look at an Apple battery that catches on fire, and how do we apply some of the same systems thinking to map out, break down, and navigate some of these tougher things? I've already started trying to do this. It's hard. I wasted a year trying to figure out how to do it. But we need more people to help and do experimentation on that. So you can either DDoS when you don't like the law, or you can help supply a law that isn't going to cause infringement on civil liberties, so it might actually solve some of the security things that they're trying to do. And then, yeah, even a lobby. Don't throw anything, please. Somebody approached me after a talk I gave and said he has tremendous experience doing political action committees. There's 501c3s, which we know of. There's also 501c4s, and there's political action committees, and there's laws about what these things are. And ultimately, the conversation became, all those things I just mentioned, we should do one of each. If you have any experience or in any of these avenues, because just complaining about it doesn't seem to be doing much about it. This one's, I think, right up our wheelhouse. We have some of the best professional social engineers on the planet. And we would more rather make fun of Legat for being on CNN than put really capable people that we chose deliberately in front of media. A few of us have crossed over to mainstream media in little spits and spurts. I'm pretty happy to see Relic. Dave Kennedy's had a couple really decent and intelligent spots. But we also have people who have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, getting up and talking about antivirus again. So I'm pretty sure we can handle this one, as long as no one makes fun of us for using the cyber word, All right. So the irony is, and I only have a minute here left or so.
Yes.
A minute. I was looking at my Building a Better Anonymous series that we spent over a year on, and I realized if you take out all the anonymous references, I was actually describing how to build a better InfoSec. The heart of that piece was ultimately saying there's 3 steps to making a better anonymous. You have to know why you're in existence, or what's your statement of belief in your first principles. And I don't think we actually know why we do what we do as a community. There's some community level interest things that we just break our way through. The second thing we said was you should define how you're going to conduct yourself, with your code of conduct, your parameters, how you're going to execute your will. If you have something that's important to you, how you're going to go pursue it. And then a whole series of what and how type things, which said measure twice, cut once, choose fewer things, do them better, prioritize stuff. We had a whole bunch of unlocking your inner badass, blah, blah, blah. And if anyone's even remotely interested in helping to start this kind of stuff, we have plenty of thoughts. We just need more participants. And ultimately, I know that this can't just be one person standing up and complaining for a Saturday. I've started experimenting with team-ups. Right? Whether you know half those spaces or not, or whether it's too dark in here, some problems are bigger than any one hero, right? So I have mad respect for the god of thunder, H.D. Moore. I have mad respect for genius philanthropist Gene Kim, the hulkish might of Dan Kaminsky, Alex Hutton's scheming behind the scenes of numbers. We have really decent folks who tend to work on their own projects, but very, very impressive results have come when I put these folks together on specific projects. These folks and others. So rather than looking at how to get your next talk submitted, I'd encourage you to find a teammate who's good at something different than you, and you will have much better results.
Wait, who gets the team up with Scarlett Johansson?
Yeah, we didn't have a Scarlett Johansson, but I did have an evil squirrel. So. All right. And if you think that's stupid, honey badger don't care. Because honey badger does care. I hope you do too. All right, can you do better? Make it better? Thank you.